Hey, BA fam, it's your girl, Mandy Money. Welcome back to Brown Ambition. I always want to keep it a buck with y'all. I came into this episode today, to this conversation that you're going to hear, feeling scared, feeling exhausted, feeling a little bit helpless, but honestly feeling so damn grateful. Because in what world could I have planned a better time to sit across from, even virtually, the incredible Stacey Abrams, an icon, a hero of mine, and I know of so many of yours. I actually booked this interview last year, I think December, November last year. And yeah, what a time to have Stacey on the show. We're talking about the killing of Alex Pratt, the death of Renee Good at the hands of ICE, their murders, I should say, their tragic and unjustified slayings in the street in broad daylight by an unhinged federal agency that has been given a blank check to apparently murder American citizens and to kidnap children and their families across this country, and have been able to do it for over a year now. And on top of that, we're also looking at potentially another government shutdown on January 30th, that if we do not fight for, and yes, actually fight for a shutdown, and we'll talk about this with Stacey as well, you'll understand why she says a shutdown is actually necessary. And despite the pain it may cause temporarily, a matter of life and death. Stacey Abrams is more than a political leader. She's a voting rights champion, an entrepreneur, a best-selling author. She served as the minority leader in the Georgia House of Representatives, built one of the most influential voter engagement organizations in the country, and has twice run historic campaigns for the governor of Georgia. And I will never forgive my home state for fumbling a Stacey Abrams administration. What were we thinking? Stacey is the founder of multiple companies, the author of both nonfiction and fiction bestsellers, and she's the host of one of my favorite podcasts, Assembly Required, where she breaks down the state of our democracy and what we can do about it. Today, we're going to be talking about her 10 steps framework, which is giving us a language and tools to meet this moment exactly where we are. Stacey breaks down what that actually means for our rights, our safety, our money, and our ability to build the lives we've been working so hard for. We get into how authoritarians use chaos and violence to make us feel small, what nonviolent, not passive, but what does nonviolent resistance really look like, and why status does not equal safety anymore. Something I ain't got to tell you, BA fam, we've been knowing this, but status cannot even save anyone anymore. Not for us, not for them, not for anyone. We're going to talk about the economy and the shame we may feel having been impacted by layoffs, having been impacted by the increasing cost of living, navigating debt, also navigating our own dreams, our hopes and aspirations. Stacey's going to talk about how she herself navigated six-figure debt in the public eye. She's going to share a little bit about her unsexy, but I think kind of sexy money systems that help her keep taking those big swings anyway. And because you know that we believe joy is a form of resistance around here, we also make space to talk about what she's watching to bring herself some comfort these days. So if you've been feeling like you're in that functional freeze, you're scrolling while you're caregiving, job hunting, all the things, and you're just thinking, not today, I cannot possibly do one more thing, this episode is for you. Stacey is going to give you concrete steps, including a toolkit that I'm going to link to in the show notes. So you can pick just one action to take from that toolkit today and feel like you actually do have power. Power can lead to change. Here's my conversation with the great Stacey Abrams. First and foremost, it's really nice to have you back. It's been a few years since you were on originally.
And you guys continue to grow. So thanks for not forgetting us little people.
Oh, stop it. It's like, I know there's something right if Stacey says yes. All right, well, let's get into it. I want to set a quick intention. I try to do this with episodes that feel big, just to kind of ground myself. So what I wrote down is that my intention is I want BA fam, our listeners, to listen to this conversation and feel a little less helpless and a lot more empowered, which I know is going to happen because you're here. And for you too, I want you to feel seen as a whole person, as a leader, an entrepreneur, but as a woman as well, and not just a headline, not just the is she going to run, won't she run, all that. So that's the intention for today's show.
Mandy, I appreciate that. Thank you. And it is received.
All righty, let's get into it. Stacey, welcome back to Brown Ambition. The last time you were here, we were talking all about, your life as a business baddie and your book, Level Up, and the invisible forces that can hold businesses back. But today, we're switching things up a little bit. It's all about our rights, our safety, our democracy. And it's your work, incredible work. The work you've done to develop your 10 steps campaign, where you've laid out 10 steps to autocracy. And I have to say, reading them all, I'm like, oh, we did it. Check, 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 check. But you've also counteracted that with your 10 steps to freedom framework. And we're going to get into all that. Before we do, though, I just want to say we're recording this on Monday, January 26th. I know many of us, including myself, are coming into this conversation feeling scared, feeling sad, tired, and just really craving maybe some clarity in some direction. I'm a mom, I'm a Black woman trying to build a life in this community like we all are. And I just hope this conversation allows us both to be real about what's happening. So, with that in mind, when you look at everything that's been unfolding, the killing of Alex Pratt, the just less than 3 weeks since the killing by ICE of Renee Good, where is your head and your heart at right now?
Mandy, thank you for having me. I will tell you, before this conversation, I was recording my podcast, Assembly Required. And we have this A block that we do where I talk about news or thoughts of the day. And over the weekend, uh, a scripture kept playing in my head. And it's the scripture from Matthew and Mark. It's when Jesus says, and depending on which version of the Bible, which prophet you're reading, apostle you're reading, he says, well, good, how does it profit a man to inherit the world but lose his own soul? And so often we think about that in the context of the evildoer, of the oligarch, of the authoritarian. But what it's resonated for me is, what is my responsibility to protect my peace, to protect my family, to protect my community at the expense of others? What am I thinking that, how, do I think I'm the hero in the story if I'm not taking action? Because my world is this small thing. And because I'm protecting this small thing, those I don't know, those I haven't had a chance to meet, sacrificing those. And I say it that way because the goal of this onslaught, the goal of this murder and killing, this propaganda, this oppression, it is designed to make us feel small and powerless. It is designed to strip us of our sense of not just autonomy and agency, but effectiveness. And when I think of Jesus in that moment, he's not just talking to the people who say they have power, he's talking to the people who think they've already forfeited their power. And so, where I ground myself in this moment is, what can I do? How do I make certain that I don't save my small little corner of the world and lose my soul? We all have something we can do. We all have a way that we can be engaged and intentional. We don't all have to be out there. And by God, no one should be called upon to sacrifice their lives the way we have seen happen in recent days. But that does not exempt us from holding ourselves responsible for the world that we want to create, the world we want to be a part of. And so that's where I sit. It's
Mhm.
this tracing of my obligation and how I can be most present and most useful, because it's not just about the bad guys doing worse. It's about the good guys believing we can do better.
Yeah. I mean, the images that we've seen from Minneapolis, the streets full of, I mean, I can't, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of people. I look to those images and I find a lot of hope.
Mhm.
And I feel their bravery for going out there and fighting. And yeah, thank you for. Well, you mentioned your podcast, Assembly Required, and I have to say that I mean, obviously, I'm from Atlanta, I'm from Georgia, and you mean a lot to me, and I try not to let that get in the way. But your podcast, I really have to say, it's been a salve and a balm to my soul. It really is. I re-listened to your episode from last week, which was covering Renee Good, just to kind of ground myself and to remember that there is a lot to be done. And I thank you for those words
Yeah.
and that reminder, and spoken like a true daughter of a reverend.
Double PK, man.
Now, right now, I mean, you've already said, I'm not going to be seeking any elected office in 2026, but you are busier than ever. You have your podcast. You recently released the third in your Avery Keene series. Stacey Abrams is not someone to sit around and do nothing. And you said the most effective thing I can do now, the way I can serve now, is by continuing to do this important work. And a big piece of that now is your 10 Steps campaign. So for Brown Ambition listeners who are hearing about it for the first time, tell us a little bit about it and what your hope is for this campaign.
Sure. Look, we are all frightened and overwhelmed, and that's the point. We are in the midst of what is described by most scholars as a competitive authoritarian nation. We are no longer a functioning democracy as we understand it. We're a competitive authoritarian country. Another term of art for that is anocracy. And part of mission is that we don't know it. We don't understand it. We just think stuff is bad. And so the 10 Steps campaign is really born of two responsibilities. One, so we got to recognize where we are. And so the 10 steps to authoritarianism and autocracy really are, here are the guideposts, but also here are the explainers. When you see something happen and you think, well, is this part of their mishigas? The answer is yes. And here's how you know it. So when thousands of Black women lost their jobs in the federal government, that was part of step 4, gut the government so it doesn't work for others. But they don't put up a big sign saying, we're doing step 4. What they do instead is they fire all of these people who have been responsible for making sure we get what we need. That when you need your social security check, you have someone to call. That when your kid has an IEP and you need to make sure that they are, managing it properly, you've got someone to call. But instead, we no longer have a functioning Department of Education. And so the 10 steps to authoritarianism and autocracy is to lay out the 10 things that you have to look for and look at. The fact that we have someone in charge of health and human services who doesn't believe in health or human service. That's step 5, installing loyalists. And our conversation about Minnesota and New Orleans and Charlotte and Chicago and Portland and DC and San Francisco and Los Angeles. That's all step 9. That's normalizing state violence. And so I want people to be able to recognize what is. But then the second job is that we got to activate, because they don't get to win just because this is what they're doing. They've got a head start because they control the mechanisms of government, but they can't control us. And so the 10 steps to freedom and power are about, how do we activate ourselves? How do we commit? How do we share? How do we organize and mobilize? How do we disrupt and protest? How do we litigate? How do we elect? But those component pieces are things that we know have worked in nations that have faced authoritarian rise. This is what they've done to win. Nonviolent, which is not the same as peaceful. I just want to put that out there. We can come back to if you want. But nonviolent ways that you can resist. But those two things, recognizing and activating, lead us to the third, which is the thing that makes me the most excited. And it's why Brown Ambition is so important. It's, what do we demand? Like, what is it that we actually want? I don't want what we had, because if what we had worked, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in now. So what is it that we should have had all along, or that we can imagine now? So we got to recognize, we have to activate, and we have to build the thing that we need. And that's the 10 Steps campaign. We are a wayfinder. We connect people, we connect organizations, and we connect folks to ideas, concepts, and resources so we can build our way to the better America that we deserve.
Amen. Yeah, and we'll make sure to put the full toolkit in the show notes for y'all. I'm also thinking, I have a 6-year-old, and I'm like, how do I sneak? How do I? It's sort of like a curriculum almost. I mean, I feel like this could be this could be any framework for any educators across America. What do we got to do to get this in textbook form? I don't know. But as a parent, I think it's so important. I feel like you've given me some of the language I can use to explain it to my 6-year-old. It was really tough yesterday. We're snowed in. We got like 18 inches of snow. I'm from Georgia, but girl, they got me out here in New York and
Oh,
did like 20 inches of snow. And I got my 6-year-old and my 2-year-old, and they're running around and they don't care. And I'm watching, I'm on my phone and the group chat's popping off, and I got the same different angles of this killing coming through. And the kids are sensing a difference. And it's like, why is mommy so agitated? Why so sad? And I'm, trying to find the words, and I find this framework to, even just like sharing. That's a part of the 10 steps, sharing and staying informed and then sharing that. It felt like I did a little something just by trying to explain to my 6-year old, what ice is. And that took a minute because, but thank you so much for that. I mean, Brown Ambition listeners, we are extremely educated. We are the 92%. And I think what a lot of listeners have told me is that it's not so much about always knowing what to do and the steps to take. Unfortunately, we have been through this many, many times, a big, moment like this. And often it's the overwhelm and the feeling in this space like there's so much happening. We're caregiving. We are, we are for ourselves and for our family, and trying to make ends meet and all of that. And what do you say to someone who may be feeling like it's too much and just not today? Not today, please. No, don't ask me for anything.
So I say we don't all have to do the same thing, but we all have to do something. And what I mean by that is part of the effectiveness of oppression is crowding out our sense of agency, making us think that it's not worth it or that we're too tired, that it can't be done. And so if you do something, even if it's a small thing, that something reconnects you to the larger intent. And our responsibility, our resilience is not that we don't get beaten down. It's not that we don't hurt. It's that we don't stay down. We don't stay in our harm. We let that scar tissue become protective armor. And to the rest of the 92%, we've got a lot of armor. But the way we rebound is that we don't deny the pain. We don't pretend it didn't happen. We don't pretend in ignorance that others seem to feel comfortable with. We confront it, but we confront it knowing that we can't do everything everywhere all at once, but we can do
Mhm.
something somewhere soon. And so we find that thing. So if it's sitting with your 6-year-old and having this conversation, that might feel small, but that 6-year-old becomes that 20-year-old who's prepared to stop this from happening again. And I'm going to do a little plug because of something you said about your 6-year-old. So last year, I published a book called Stacey Speaks Up. And I have a kids series, and the 3 books in the series, one is about how do you learn to live with how do you learn to lose well and deal with bullies. The second one is about facing your fears, but also expanding your community. And the third one is how do you fight back against power? How do kids find power when they don't think they have it? And I write each of these because it's what I've learned to deal with. And the reason I tie it back to this question is that, I write these books for kids, but I think the adults who read it hopefully will hear it too. We have lost so much in such a short period of time. And for many of us, we've been losing since we got here. We have been told that we are not enough for the moment that we're in. The attacks on DEI are broad attacks that attack race and gender and ability and class, but they always come back to us. And we've been told we're not enough, but we are. In fact, we're so much more than enough that they are terrified of us. And we've been told that the powers that be are so overwhelming that we have no purchase in pushing back. But we do. And we know we do because that's why those in Minneapolis stood outside in the freezing cold demanding. But they also filmed things, they said things, and they are forcing a conversation. They are forcing the fight. I know how hard this is. I know how overwhelming it feels. But part of what we tell our kids, we got to tell ourselves, is that we are more than adequate for this moment. But we got to take some breaks so that we can get back in the fight.
Yeah. You gave me one of my favorite sort of mantras is joy. Joy is often like a form of resistance. And I wondered, I know it's been a heavy couple of days, but if I could just ask, what's giving you little pockets of joy? Are there any small, is it music? Is it a show? Is it anything of comfort that's reminding you that, okay, there's small moments of joy to be found?
My joy starts with my family. We've had a rough year. So beyond the, fall of democracy and the rise of authoritarianism, both my father and my sister have been navigating some really serious health concerns. And for the
Mm.
first time in, almost a decade, we were all together for the holidays. I've got 5 brothers and sisters and, you know, 6 nieces and nephews and in-laws, and for all of us to be together and for all of us to be there to be together is just a joy I carry with me. But I have relished being able to go back to comfort shows. For me, one show I love a lot that I'm rewatching right now is Elementary. Uh, it was on
Okay.
CBS years ago, and I love it because it is one of the best examples of not just mystery, but like a really excellent friendship. There is no sexual tension. There's no will they, won't they. It is entirely about how they learn to be friends for each other, two very different people. And it's just it's lovely. And it's lovely to kind of visit Joan and Sherlock in the brownstone. And yeah, there's mayhem, but
Yeah.
he's like
That's Lucy
quiet.
Liu, right? Am I remembering right? Is that
With
Lucy that's the Lucy Liu one?
Lou and Johnny Lee
I
Miller,
watched
who
that.
dated Angelina Jolie. I didn't know that. Anyway,
Oh, fun.
and Lucy Liu's clothes are she's like quite the clothes horse. Um, but watching them,
Always been that girl.
yeah, it's fun and it's been a nice little respite.
I think you'll appreciate my comfort watch was Ever After this weekend.
That makes sense.
It's on Hulu right next to Abbott Elementary. It's a good one.
There you go. As she picks up
But
that sword.
it's still so good. It's held up so well. We Bow Down, Drew Barrymore. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's still so good. Yeah, little pockets of joy.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, and then you can sort of come back to reality. I love talking to you just in general because you challenge me to defy being pigeonholed and to embrace all the different, passions, the creativity, the different ideas that you may have in a time where it's like, focus on one thing. It's like, hell no. We're going to be business owners. We're going to write books. We're going to, just use all of the talents that we've been gifted with. And at the same time, like, I just feel like you're someone who's like really grounded and really sound financial wisdom. You have, and we've talked about it before, you've talked about running a gubernatorial campaign and having a bunch of debt at the same time, six-figure debt, which I feel like is so relevant and so relatable. A lot of us are walking around with this debt that is honestly no shame tied to it. It's long-term unemployment. You mentioned 300,000 women of color lost their jobs at the beginning of the year. I coach a lot of them. They're still looking, and what would you say to someone who's feeling like I've got these financial challenges and I just don't know if my dreams can come to fruition at this time and maybe feeling, yeah, that little bit of shame about it?
So I start with something you just said. So when people say pick a lane to me, my response is I did, and it's a highway. And so
Mm.
sometimes in these moments, our responsibility is to change lanes. We keep thinking that because we pick this lane, that's where we have to stay. But my life has compelled, not my life and my brain, have compelled me to be on this multi-lane freeway. And sometimes these moments force us to change lanes. It doesn't mean we've abandoned anything. And it doesn't mean our destination isn't the same. It just means we figured out maybe we got to shift over to get there. And I would remind folks that whether it was because of your choice or because of the perfidy and ignominy of an administration and a political party that despises Americans, whatever forced this to happen, or an oligarchy, or just some cowards in corporate who decided that DEI are 3 letters they're afraid of, even though diversity, equity, and inclusion is in our DNA. No matter what precipitated this, we got to live with what happened. But that gives us a chance to think about what would we have done? What could we do? What did we always wanted to, but never did? And the other part is once you've fallen as far as you can fall, or as far as you think you can fall, and the worst, and you still can get back up, that's an extraordinary gift. It doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like when you wish somebody giving you the receipt to so you can return it. But
Mhm.
but debt to me has been that way. when there is debt, you've got to figure out other ways to solve problems. When I was minority leader in Georgia, I didn't have the resources of the majority. In fact, they call you minority leader. They give you leader to make you feel good. They put minority so you never forget your place.
Mm.
And when I stood for minority leader, I'd say that, I told my colleagues, look, I've been a minority for a very long time. I'm really good at it. And part of being good at it was that I knew how to get things done without the resources, without the access, without the platform. And sometimes with people coming after me simply because I existed. They weren't mad at what I was doing. They just didn't want me to be the one taking the actions. And I bring this full circle because for those who have lost their jobs, they did not take your mind. They didn't take your capacity. They took your platform. And too often we mistake our position for our power. The position you held is not your power. It was your platform. Your power's still with you. So you've just been forced to shift how you're going to use that power. You've been forced to excavate another dimension to it. It's like discovering that you thought you had the ability to sling webs from your wrist, but you also can walk through walls. We got to find the other powers that we had. And sometimes we won't look until hardship forces it. Shame exists when we have made a mistake that we should be accountable for. Debt, unless you've stolen something or you mismanaged it and you don't feel bad about it, that's not an area of shame. That's an area of growth, opportunity, but it's also the result of centuries of systemic behavior that have made it harder for some of us to make mistakes because we are watching people who have squandered trillions get multiple bites at the apple. And so a few $1,000 or a few $100,000 does not diminish your intellect, your capacity, or your potential.
Sometimes I just like to Google how many rich white guys have filed bankruptcy and,
And become president of the United States.
and no one cares. And it's fine. It's another Tuesday. Money habits are really important. We talk about that a lot on this show. What's like one unsexy, but are you still following a budget? I know you're an Excel
Oh,
sheet girl, but what's like one unsexy money habit that you have that you feel like has helped you move on from that to, be more financially stable and take new entrepreneurial risks?
so two things. So I have in my Excel spreadsheet, I have my budget for the year. Then I have a tracking budget. And I make myself sit them side by side. So I make a copy and I rename it. And one has a T beside it. One tells me what I thought I was going to do, and the other tells me what reality told me I had to do. And too often we erase each month of mistakes or we adjust the budget to reflect our reality. But that then gives us amnesia, but it also gives us plausible deniability. It's an unsexy thing to have to confront what I thought I was going to do and match it to what actually happened. But in that process, I got to figure out what did or did not happen. What did I do? What did someone else do? What did the fates do? But by having that juxtaposition, I get a better sense. And second is I have an account that I set up that I can get to, but I've got to go through lots of stuff to find the password. But I've got money that just automatically goes. It's like $250 a month or something. That I don't get to touch that account. I don't get to see the balance because I don't have the password to go back into my I've
You
got
don't
it.
use
So,
the Google Password Manager app?
yeah, I gotta
It's a
work to
killer.
find it. Exactly. But because it's there, it doesn't feel like a safety net, but it feels like an opportunity. And there's gonna be a moment where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look at it. We've got to give ourselves permission to just set it and forget it. Because there's going to be an idea I have or a thing I want, and it's going to be compelling enough that I'm going to go through all the rigmarole to go find out how to get to what I set up. And we live in an age where it's not that hard to start this kind of account, but it also gives me permission to have this dream that I'm not yet ready to articulate that's growing just because I was willing to let it be.
Mm. So this is more than like an emergency fund. We're talking just like a freedom fund. Like,
It's freedom fun. Like if a
yeah.
friend says, I want to, so one thing I'm thinking about, I have a friend who's starting a business and asked me to invest. I might go and tap this fund and say, okay, I can't be one of your 6-figure investors, But if 5 figures helps, I can do this. If 4
Mm.
helps, I might be able to help. But instead of us waiting until we have everything, I want to make sure I've got something for the moment where it matters. And maybe I'm the person who invests in, Mandi Inc. And then in a few years, you come back with a 12x multiple, and we are both really, really happy.
Yeah, I mean, for BAFM, if you haven't read the book Level Up yet, it talks a lot about your background, Stacey, as an entrepreneur. I mean, you've invested in companies, you've invested in your own companies. As someone who's looking at these different business opportunities, what's going to make you say yes right now? Like, what's so cool about your friend's business? I'm just curious. I'd love to be in a position, and maybe talking to you, maybe I already am in a position to be able to, yeah, help fund someone's dream and make
Absolutely.
it happen.
And I'm going to tie this back to 10 steps because we are spending so much of our time fighting the decimation of our democracy. We forget why we have it. The whole point is that we should have the right to thrive. And we cannot allow them to rob us of the freedom and power to thrive. And that's why I fight for democracy, not because I like the abstract concept of democracy, but because I want to be able to choose what I do. And so the 10 Steps campaign for me is as much about what comes after we win as it is about the fight that we have to be a part of. And I say that to say, when I invest, I've invested in a few friends' companies, and sometimes it is a 4-figure check. Sometimes it's a 5. I've never yet been in a position where 6 figures is possible. But there are 2 things I don't do. One, I don't deny myself the opportunity to be an investor because I don't think I'm enough of one. And what I mean by that is so I have a dear friend who has an AI company that he started, and I'm helping him connect with potential customers because he's helping entrepreneurs. But he said, do you want to invest? And he gave me the number. I'm like, I don't have that kind of cash. I don't know what you thought I had, but can I give you this much? And he said yes. And so the first thing is, if I think it's a good enough idea to tell other people, then it should be enough for me to invest. And so I need to know that there's a business plan, there is an exit strategy, meaning, do you plan to grow this and run it, or do you plan to grow this and sell it? Either one works, but you need to be able to tell me which one it is. You need to have thought about it enough that you have a plan for what happens next. And then 3, how are you investing in it? If this is one of 10 things that you're doing, I am not one to cast aspersions at people doing multiple things, but I need to know where on the list is this thing. And if it's
Mm.
high enough on the list that you are making it a priority, then it's valuable enough to me to put something into it.
So asking those questions.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the 10 steps, I think a lot about the pieces of your framework for freedom around mobilization and not doing things alone. And I love the idea of, yeah, linking arms with someone and helping them get that across the finish line. Something I forgot to touch on, which I'm struggling to find a good segue, so I'm just gonna make it a hard
Oh,
one.
let's just work.
Let's talk about January 30th, a few days away. Another government shutdown's looming. I'm married to a federal worker. That sucks. Happy to have his health insurance. However, they suck. However, in your most recent episode of Assembly Required, you're speaking about how a shutdown in this case could be worth it if it means saving lives. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit with it coming up and with seems like a lot of people taking some action, calling their elected officials to get them to vote no on this budget, which would include billions of dollars in funding for ICE.
There is a tendency in American politics for us to see this as Democrat versus Republican. And that's because that's how the system is designed. We are not in normal times, and therefore we cannot construct our responses using a benign binary of Democrat versus Republican. We are now in a situation where the regime in power, a Republican regime, because it is who holds the power. They hold the House, the Senate, the presidency, and they've appointed the majority of the court. So the regime in power is Republican. They have countenanced the murder of American citizens for exercising constitutional rights. and have refused investigatory responsibility. They were willing to hold hostage senior citizens and children and the disabled under the last shutdown in order to avoid giving access to health care because the money for health care was siphoned off to pay for billionaire tax cuts. So that's where we are. So we're no longer in the polite binary of Democrat versus Republican. We are in authoritarian versus democracy. So which do you want? And because we are not in the normal fisticuffs world, part of our responsibility is that we can't use the same tools to fight back. I believe in nonviolence because it is actually the most effective means of civil resistance. But nonviolence is not the same as peaceful, and it is not the same as passive. We have power. Our legislators have power. And sometimes your power is not the ability to pass legislation. It's to be the sand in the gears to stop bad from happening. A really crass way I used to say it at the Capitol was, look, my job is to stop stupid or at least slow it down. In this case, we got to stop evil or at least slow it down. And anyone who says, well, we can't do that because these are the consequences, who are you protecting this for? They have shown they will operate with impunity. And if they know that if they are willing to do more harm, we will refuse to do good, then we are giving them power without a fight. I completely get it. When I was leader, it was part of my job to sometimes cooperate with the other side, even though I didn't like it. But what I refused to ever do, and my colleagues will tell you, there were values that I refused to compromise. You can compromise your vision, meaning how quickly do we get to what we want, but you can never compromise your values. And there was a Democrat, I think it's Tom Scuzzy of New York, Susie of New York, who just announced in a statement he regrets having voted as a Democrat. He was one of the 7 who voted for that DHS budget last week. And he says, I was wrong. I did not think about what it meant. What does it mean to give billions more to people who will shoot Americans, will tackle them to the ground, will take away, will spray them with chemical agents and then shoot them prone? That's what we're dealing with. And there is no compromise. There is no cajoling. And there is no performative pragmatism. This is about what do we need from our government and what do we need from those who speak on our behalf, and we need them to fight. And there are very few tools to fight when you're in the minority, but refusing this budget is one of those tools.
Yeah, and obviously we've had Chuck Schumer come out and say that Democrats are going to vote no on this bill, which does give some hope. And I think,
I
I
will
mean,
say that I appreciate the hope, but I believe in trust but verify. So we got to call them, not because they said they would, but because we got to remind them of what they said, and we got to stick with them and stick to it until they do. So press statements are great, but actions matter. So we cannot hope that this is what happens between now and the 30th. We have to do.
this episode's coming out on Wednesday, y'all. So you got time. All right, we have time. I'm going to make sure all of those same links to where you can find your elected officials' contact info. And it's important to call, right? Not just, I mean, you can send in all, you can copy and paste a script if you'd like, but actually picking up that phone, letting your voice be heard, that matters, right?
I was listening to, I can't remember what I was either reading or listening to, but they said, what would you do if your life depended on it?
Mm.
So how hard would you work if your life depended on it? And would you just send an email and hope that somebody reads it? Like, what else would you do? So let's treat it as though our lives depend on it, because based on what we've seen happen, not just in Minneapolis, but across this country for the last year, our lives depend on us.
It's quite sad to me. I had this thought, and I know, my therapist would say thoughts are just thoughts. They're not real. But my thought was, it was a white man who was killed in the street. Maybe people will care more now. Maybe we will have more action. And you do see this uprising, and it almost is like even scarier. I don't know what that says about, it says a lot about probably racism and systemic racism and all of that. But I hope and I mourn the loss of Alex Pretty and is it Pretty? Pretty? I don't wanna say it wrong. Is it just
I've heard
Pretty?
Freddie mostly.
Pretty. And Renee Good, and I mean, I think that they're so brave and they were obviously activists and they were being good citizens, and I hope that it wasn't in vain, you know? It was unnecessary, it was tragic, but please don't let it be in vain, and, um, yeah, I take to heart what you said. What would you do if your life was on the line?
Well, on the podcast today, which will come out on Tuesday, I was talking to Erin Ryan, who's the host of Hysteria,
Mm.
and she and I really had that conversation. And the reality is, in this moment, because we are fighting an enemy that is in pursuit of unadulterated power, that's what authoritarianism is. And in this reality, status is not safety. Your status based on your race, based on your gender, based on your economy, that status no longer provides safety. And for the Brown ambition audience, our status has never been safety. So our urgency is even higher because if their status cannot protect, we who have no status or whose status has been diminished over time and in sharp relief by this administration cannot presume that it will protect us. Our citizenship doesn't protect us. Our presence in this country doesn't protect us. The Second Amendment did not protect Alex Pratt. And so status is no longer safety, which is why our safety has to be in our numbers. Our safety has to be in our intention. And the whole point of the 10 Steps campaign is to connect us to one another, connect us to resources, and connect us to these pathways that we know can work to get us to what we actually deserve.
Well, at a time like this, Stacey, I just again, thank you so much for your time. I know you have to go. The 10 steps to freedom and the framework to freedom. I'm going to put that all in the show notes, BA fam. And honestly, thank you for giving something concrete we can hang on to. If anyone's feeling disempowered or unsure what to do or kind of in that functional freeze, all I have to do is send them a link to this toolkit. And it really gives just if you do one thing, BA fam, just pick one thing from the list, do
Absolutely.
it today as you're listening to this, and you'll feel that much more empowered. And Stacey Abrams, such an honor. Thank you so much for your time and for all that you're doing.
It's always a joy to be with you. Thank you so much, Mandy.
Thank you. All right, take care.